Good morning. Pitch black again in the UK. I'm sure it's lovely and sunny in Australia. How is it today, Dan?
Yeah, a little bit patchy, but we've enjoyed some lovely weather. Thanks, Steve.
Good. Well, thanks very much for coming on this morning, coming on again. Really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to working with you next week, which we'll come on to in a bit. Just really wanted to speak to you about obviously what's happening in the UK now this week. Gone into lockdown, apart from estate agents and letting agents who can work with everything going on. Obviously, you've experienced that in Australia. I know Melbourne was shut down for 90 days, I believe.
Yep.
And Josh was on here on Tuesday. He was talking about in Sydney there were 4 cases and that's it. Everybody's going crazy. And I think Josh was a little bit embarrassed by having that discussion, obviously, when I think there were over the record amount of deaths here yesterday, sadly.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. So I know you work with a lot of top performers over there. And I just wondered, what did they do when they went in lockdown and what was lockdown in Australia? Morning, Anton. Morning, Phoebe. Thanks for joining us. Morning, Sol.
We had in Melbourne, particularly more so than Sydney, had a 90-day lockdown. Now, to give everyone a bit of context, estate agents weren't able to show properties, or the only ones they were able to show is if they'd sold them and they had to do a final inspection. But if you had any new properties that you wanted to sell or show or do viewings, you certainly weren't able to do that. The other thing that you couldn't do were appraisals. So it was really severely locked down. And I worked really closely. We've got a couple of really big clients. I've got about 400 agents under my wing in Melbourne, and we learn a lot about ourselves in that marketplace. Some of the things that we learned was particularly around appraisals and making sure that agents weren't switching off. And the analogy I like to use, in the period with my agents was that, think of a wood chip pile. What you want to do is continue to chop wood. You want to be ringing your database first and foremost, checking in on how the human being's going on the other end of the telephone. But what you want to make sure is that you're building your wood chip pile. So think of workman-like or workwoman-like in that you're just making phone calls, reconnecting with your database and building a wood chip pile. Now, what happened for us, just to give everyone a bit of context, and I know this happened in New Zealand as well with some of our clients. Now, in Melbourne, just over the last 6 to 8 weeks, Steve, it has bounced back stronger than I've ever seen it. It's we use auction clearance, how many properties clear in 4 weeks as a real strong measurement tool. And Melbourne was breaking 80% plus. Sydney got as high as the high 80s. New Zealand, when they came out of lockdown, were into the 90s. It was almost the strongest market they'd ever seen. And what that was all about, I think, was, the market being held back and then being released. Now, the agents that were making those phone calls and were reconnecting with their database and building that momentum with those conversations really came out and went bang over that October-November period. I think I mentioned to you, Matt Steinwade's a client of ours, and Matt could be on here now listening. And Matt came out in October and wrote 980,000. Now, to give everyone context, that's 37 sales, Steve. That's 37 separate vendors and buyers that he matched deals together with a team of 4 in his business unit. I had another gentleman by the name of Lute Sacco. He's a Melbourne agent. He did just on 34 sales in the month of November. And that was off the back of, being locked down for 90 days. So I would be saying really clearly now, you really want to make sure that you're connecting with your database. I can't tell you, Steve, how often, and you'd probably be the same, where you're sitting down with agents. You might say to them, when you're first beginning to coach them, how many people have you got on your database? How many people own pieces of real estate that are on your database? I'd be often sitting with people and they might have been in the industry for 4 or 5 years and they've got 100 people sitting on their database. I'm like, I cannot believe you've been in the industry for 5 years and you've only got 100 people sitting on your database. You should have 2,000 or 3,000 by this stage. What have you been doing with all these contacts? So it was a wonderful opportunity for people to reconnect, refresh their database, rebuild it. And I was setting targets for our guys for 30 connections a day, Steve. I was saying, look, up until about 11:30 every day, if you're not connecting with 30 people, you're wasting this incredible opportunity. I know it's unfortunate, obviously, the pandemic has created a number of health issues, But I honestly believe in the context of real estate, this is a 1 in 100 year opportunity for real estate agents. It really is. It's an opportunity for you to leapfrog your marketplace, get your database squeaky clean, reconnect with everyone you know, sort it out in an orderly manner, which we can talk about in a moment if you like, Steve, how you would set your database up, and get yourself ready for when things you're able to go out and do business as normal.
Okay, so here, I mean, in the first lockdown, it was similar to what you described. So, you know, everybody had to stay at home, estate agents were shut. Since lockdown, the second lockdown, estate agents were allowed to open. So we had exactly the same. The bounce was incredible from June. Agents had record pipelines, all constipated because of an incredible system here. So, you know, still taking time to go through. The government gave loads of schemes. So we've got the stamp duty holiday that ends end of March this year. So lockdown 3, which was done this week, estate agents and letting agents are still allowed to work. You know, speaking to some agents this week, it's been a mix actually. Some are really busy, which is great. There's still clients. I spoke to a client yesterday that's had 18 offers this week and's booked in 32 market appraisals. So
Wow.
it's absolutely crazy. I've got another client who's still doing virtual market appraisals. So, you know, obviously safety and of our customers, our staff, ourselves is incredibly important. I've got one question for you that I'm going to come back to you that somebody asked yesterday. But what sort of conversations would you be having with the people that are home? So I agree, it's all about being human. It's all about being caring. It's all about being helping. You know, and let's just say a few hellos because loads of people have joined. Morning, David. Morning, Andy. Morning, Chris, Hack, Tony, Jim, Andrea, Andy. Thanks so much for joining this morning. Really grateful. So thank you. So coming back to that, you know, what sort of conversations will you be happening? Do you think it's, you know, should you be saying, well, you know, are you still looking to move in this situation, or, you know, what can I do to help you?
I wouldn't be going straight to the, you know, the scenario where you're saying, you know, when do you want to move? I think that's too much pressure, and it's almost like on the telephone. I know why you're here now. So for me, it's more about, as we said initially, how are you going, Steve, and just seeing where the conversation goes. One of the things that I think we need to be aware of is that, you know, people are living in their houses now 24/7. And if there are any issues in living in that home, it's starting to become more relevant than ever because they're in their homes 24/7. So I like to sort of start with, you know, first of all, when you're ringing the person, you want to know where you're calling, you want to know the location, you want to know roughly, hopefully, on your database, you've made a few notes on what the last conversation entailed, but you want to ask them about how the home's going for them. How are they living in their home at the moment? You know, and they, you know, obviously lockdown is difficult for some. Some are actually thriving, but others are finding it more difficult. How's living in your home at the moment? How have you found it through lockdown? And really listen for those answers. You know, have you found that you need less space? Do you find that you need more space? Are you finding that you're using your third bedroom more? How about, you know, the living area? How have you altered your home to be able to cope with the pandemic? I really think by just discovering how people live in their home and how functional it is or not is going to really unveil what those opportunities are. People typically change houses because the way it functions doesn't necessarily work. People change because of areas and lifestyle choices. Death, divorce, there's probably half a dozen key reasons why people move, Steve, and I think what we've got to sort of try and do is do it quite subtly. What we're seeing, and I'd be interested to see what your take is on it, since the pandemic, even in our rental and letting market here, a lot of our apartments, 1 and 2 bedders, are becoming vacant, and all the houses are filling up because everyone's wanting the 3rd and 4th bedroom. And there's a real trend of people sort of moving out of the cities at the moment and moving further out into suburbia and moving into state. And that's just off the back of, hey, I'm living in this house. I realise the functionality of it is just not working at the moment. And I think if you go a little bit deeper into that, Steve, the conversation will take care of itself.
Yeah, I agree. Spot on. So virtual appraisals.
Yep.
You know, how were they being conducted over there then? Have you got any tips on that, please?
Well, goes into the same conversation. It's depending on how deep the person is into the decision of making a move. But if it was very early on, I'd be on the phone with them and I'd just say, hey, you know, if you're all open to it, I could take a look around now and give you an idea of what your home's worth, just virtually through your FaceTime on your telephone, if you'd like to do that. If that's not doable, then what you might want to do is just do a walkthrough and record the video on your telephone, and just over the Zoom, what we can do is we can sort of talk through what I've seen and certainly give you some ideas of some recent properties that have sold in the area and try and match it up. What I think we've got to also do, Steve, in these markets is not necessarily do the appraisal on the home that they're selling. You've got to do the appraisal in the market they're wanting to move to. That's a really important point. You want to find a little bit about what is it that they're moving, what problem are they moving away from? What are the options in the marketplace for them? If you don't know what those options are, go to a more experienced salesperson in your office and ask them. So if someone was downsizing, where are they moving at the moment? What are the 3 options or 4 options? And then what you want to do is make a recommendation that if you're downsizing, if you're upsizing, people are tending to move to these 3 markets. Now, can I just say the market that we're in right now, over the last 9 months since the start of this pandemic, has actually held ground, but the market that you're looking to buy into has gone up by 5%, Steve. So if we look at what your changeover costs are, this is actually costing you £5,000 a week by staying where you are. I just want to make you aware of that. Your mortgage is going to blow out every month based on the marketplace you're wanting to move to. So, you know, I'd be doing it a little bit sooner rather than later. So I guess the point that I want to make here, Steve, is that we really need to be aware of where are they thinking of moving to, and almost doing a double appraisal and trying to work out, I call it, you know, is the mortgage compressing or is it blowing out? And I think these are the conversations that really high quality estate agents have to get people thinking differently.
Actually, and you just got me thinking there, and I know I'm going slightly off subject, but yesterday I read a couple of articles. So here on mortgages, that HSBC are bringing back 90% mortgages for first-time buyers. Coventry Building Society are bringing 90% mortgage for first-time buyers. So, you know, people watching this morning, these are messages that you should be giving out to your community, that this is what's actually going on. So the deals out there, if people want to move now, we can still move. Morally, whether that's right or not is another question, maybe to be answered for another day. But be interesting for all the people that are watching. Would you mind commenting and just saying how it started for you? Whether you're seeing, do people still want physical face-to-face appointments? Are people requesting more virtual appraisals? Please just put in the comments and give us a flavour, because obviously you're all up and down the country. So
Steve, with this mindset, you know, I wanted to just make a comment here. We as estate agents have this paradigm and this mindset that we've got to see the property to do the appraisal, to give them the figure, to have the conversation. What I've seen since the pandemic is this: if the estate agent is very clear that they can appraise a property without physically seeing it, you can get a client to say yes to you without physically seeing it. You can actually get someone to buy a property sight unseen without them seeing it. And until the agent shifts their mindset on believing and understanding that and just having a go at changing up the rhythm and the order in which they're doing things, they're just never going to entertain that idea. They'll just be looking from their perspective. Now, I'm not saying that's for everyone. Not everyone can buy sight unseen, but a lot can. Not everyone will want to list with you without meeting you physically and for you to have a look at their home, but a lot will. And I guess what we've got to try and do up front in these conversations is try where we can to go deeper into the needs analysis on the telephone before going out and seeing them, and just see how far you can take that conversation.
Yeah. Okay. So, Andy, people want to know they're safe. We need to communicate more about how we're keeping our community safe. Hack in Sheffield, people want physical. Thank you for both of you. So yeah, so it's interesting to see. I mean, the other thing here we had, I don't know if you come across Marcus Rashford, who's a Man United footballer here, and he started school dinner campaign to make sure that kids who who weren't able to go to school and get their school dinners. And that's been hugely successful, and he's forced Boris Johnson to make sure that's carried on. One of the things now, just listening to, the schools are now closed, and there's a lot of people are studying from home now, so loads of homeschooling again. And one of the things that I think agents can do with their community is get involved with local schools, find out if they need some computers for kids to use whilst they're at school, so they can do these meetings that we're doing as well, and maybe start a computer campaign for local schools and get the whole community involved.
So many things you can do, Steve. And, just this idea that we need to be in someone's house to appraise the home and to be known as a real estate agent, is a 1990s idea. Well, you just said then you can list someone's home and be their agent, as you said, servicing them through those types of ways. We've got people here over in Australia where they look at people like, car washes are really big here, the local car wash. So they'll just virtually do their business all day, every day in the local car wash, and they just, build their profile that way. You've got people that are walking around. One of the leading agents I coach here in Sydney in the eastern suburbs, he walks around Bondi Junction Shopping Centre, which is the Magic Shopping Centre. He just does all his business in there, walks around all day just saying hello to all the shop owners, and everyone knows who he is, and that's his real estate office, right? Everyone's got their own technique in doing that. The old age thing of doing business just in someone's home, I think, you're going to lose a lot of business if that's the way you think.
So one of the questions, and it came up in a Facebook group yesterday, and I've had it as well, is canvassing. So should I be canvassing other agents' properties, even door knocking today? So again, comment, are you still canvassing? Have you stopped that? What's your canvassing plan? So again,
for me, Steve, it depends on the type of agent you are, right? So if anyone, so I like to just historically look at where the agent's listings are coming from. If they're brand new and they have no idea about, what's going to work or what's not going to work, what I might say to them is, once a property comes on the market in the area that you're wanting to service, reach out and contact that homeowner, congratulate them on the agent that they've appointed, but find out whether they want to buy and just start servicing them from that end, and show them, the agent that you are by giving them options in the marketplace. And then from time to time in those conversations, once the relationship builds, they will ask you questions about some of the information the agent that they've listed with is asking them, and that could take you to other places. The thing that I'm most excited about with this training course we're doing next week, I'll be spending the first day all around lead generation, and there'll be 40 or 50 ideas that I'm going to give everyone around exactly what you've just asked. One of those ideas being that, that most of your listings right now, right, that are sitting there waiting for you to contact are usually through the people that you know. But what most people don't know how to do is to actually ask for that opportunity of the person they're in contact with, whether that's a buyer, seller, past client, past appraisal, the person that you mentioned at the school that you're trying to network. People don't know how to ask the question without feeling like they're impeding on that person's life. And Steve, we're going to go through that in more detail Monday. Really looking forward to it.
Okay, lovely. Well, look, you touched on it. I wasn't going to touch on it, so thank you. So I'm looking forward. We've got 5 1-hour sessions with you next week. Prospecting on the first day, presentation skills, vendor management, buyer management, and negotiating skills. And I know that you've just kindly agreed to anybody that's coming on the course is going to go into a hat. And one of the persons is going to be very fortunate to have a 30-minute free coaching session with you. So, which I'm very grateful for. If they ask a question, they will go into it. So
even I don't call them free coaching sessions. I call them complimentary. Nothing's for free. It's complimentary. You've invested in the program. If you put, I always say about these things, whether you're in the training room with me or you're on one of these webinars, really lean into it. Don't just be passive, sit back and learn, really lean in, throw the questions out there, email Steve before the session, after the session. If there's something I've said or something Stephen said and you want more information, just sponge. Steve, I just wanted to share this. I was at a conference. It was late February, and the guy that I was training for Century 21 over there, they had about 500 agents in this audience, and it was over in a place called Western Australia. There's a guy over there by the name of Josh Brockhurst. He's the #1 agent in WA. And to give you an idea, #1 agent, there's probably about 2,500 estate agents in Western Australia. He's #1, or one of the top, if not #1. And I go into this conference, and there's all these Century 21 agents there. And one of the guys running it, he said, Dan, look, you're next up. We're about to talk about lead generation. He said, just want to let you know, Josh Brockhurst is in the room. And I'm like, who's that? Like, I wasn't quite sure who he was. He goes, oh, he's the #1. Okay, great, excellent. At the end of the session, Steve, everyone had left. Brockhurst was up the back of the conference with 10 pages full of notes. He was the last to leave. Now, as I was walking up the aisle, and I was, packing up all my stuff, he was there still madly sort of taking notes and summarising what he'd learned. He said to me, hey, Dan, my name's Josh Brockhurst. I said, hey, how are you, Josh? How did you find today? He goes, mate, that was some of the best content, And he said to me, Dan, is anyone driving you home to your hotel? Right? Now, this place that I was training at was about 45 minutes from Perth CBD. And I said, no, I'm actually just going to get an Uber. He goes, no, I'll drive you to your hotel. Now, in my 20 years doing this, Steve, I've never had anyone offer to drive me back to my hotel. That is why he's #1. Now, Josh knew that he was going to get a free one-on-one on the way back to the hotel, but you just can't teach that, right? You just can't teach that in a human being. But here he is, the #1 agent, copious pages of notes, up the back, driving me to my hotel and sponging me for more. But and I was learning off him as well. He's got a brilliant mind. But I'll just say, just be part of it. Really, go boots and all, and you'll get so much more out of it. It might even be you see people, on the webinar, because we're all going to be on Zoom. You're going to see everyone's name. You might reach out to such and such and ask them what they thought after the session. I can see he's a really good agent that's working, out of area, and I've heard a lot about him through all sorts of media channels. I might reach out and just see what he thought of Dan. Really lean.
The Overman who's watching this has already sent a message out to people who wants to pair with him to go through all the stuff and hold each other accountable, which I thought was absolutely fantastic.
Outstanding.
So, a couple of final questions then, because I'm grateful for your time again. If I can go back to maybe Josh and maybe Matt, who did this 37 sales in a month after lockdown. That's a great story from Josh, and it demonstrates why he's a top performer. What sort of things were they doing then? What was Matt doing to get 37 sales?
Great question.
Was it a combination of everything he did whilst he was in lockdown, making all those calls?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. You're talking selling more than a property a day, Steve. So you've almost got to start the day with a mindset. What are we saying today, guys? Like that was where they were at, because they had to do the catch-up thing. And when you go to that mode, you just got no time to just, talk fluff with people. It's like, Steve, do you want to buy the property? Because if not, I'll sell it to someone tomorrow. Like not in that tone, but it's almost like just cutting to the mustard. That's what happens when you're doing that volume. Now, if you put a GoPro camera on Matt Steinwade's head, and Matt and I talk about this a lot, putting a GoPro camera on his head, you're going to see him in more conversations looking for listings than any other agent in his area. So he's going to be on the phone, either looking for more listings. So in a conversation, not preparing it, not mucking around with his database, in it, talking to people saying, do you want to list? Or he's going to be at a house with a seller saying, I don't think the price is quite there, it's here. So can we reduce the price to get it more into the market? Or you're going to see him with a buyer, even though he doesn't do as much buyer work, but if it's a high-end property, he'll be with the buyer at a property, looking them in the eye saying, do you want to buy it? I think it's a perfect match for you.
Yeah.
So you're just going to see him in far more of those critical conversations. And if you think about like listing a home, Steve, I mean, by the time you get there, you build a bit of rapport, you do the needs analysis, you go through your gears and talk about a few different subjects here and there. The moment of where you ask for business is all of about 30 to 45 seconds. And a guy like Steinway, all he does is he just gets to that moment far quicker, and he just times it beautifully. You know, we had one. I got another guy that was I'm coaching over in because Matt's up in the central coast of New South Wales. Another guy I was coaching in Melbourne. Anyway, this guy in Melbourne I was coaching said, oh, I'm working with a buyer that Matt's selling the house for. And I said, oh, I shared this with Matt the other day, and I said, oh, what have they found dealing with Steinway like? And he said, well, he had me in the car, and he actually had just listed a property, but it hadn't been marketed yet. And apparently he was waiting to get a signed, we call them agency agreements over here, Steve, the exclusive agency agreement. And he was just waiting to get initial on. He turned up with this buyer in the car. And the contract had already been done because you've got to do that legally in New South Wales. Contract had been done, hadn't had the final initial on the agency. Marketing hadn't been done. Rocks up with the car. The house was half styled. And he said to the owner, I've got the guy in the back now. Can I just show it to him? Well, we haven't even started the marketing, Matt. Well, look, this is a great opportunity. This guy, bang, sold. So it's all about a timing thing. And I sort of say to real estate agents, like if you look at real estate as, you've got two shoe factories. One shoe factory produces the shoe in 30 days and the other shoe factory produces exactly the same shoe in 5 days. Which shoe factory would you buy? You'd buy the one that can do the shoe in 5 days, right? Now with Matt, he'll do a deal in 5 to 7 days because he lists it right. And then what happens with that is he's got another 23 days to find other listings, whereas everyone else is still scrambling, you see. So it's that art form, of knowing how to list properly. One of the things that we are going to go deeper on into day 2, Steve, is pricing property. I personally think pricing a home, and where someone says to you, how much is my homework? I think that's technically the most skillful thing we do as estate agents, knowing how to manage that. Now, I'm not saying that, you manage it poorly, but what I'm saying is if to sell something in 5 to 7 days, you need to be highly skilled in that conversation. You can be sloppy in that conversation and take 3 months to 6 months to sell the thing if you want and overprice it. But to know how to actually articulate that conversation, to be able to not lose the listing, win it correctly, for me is the most high skilled thing we do. And we're going to dig deeper on that on day 2, Steve. Looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Me too. Look, thanks very much for your time.
Pleasure.
I'm going to let you enjoy your Friday night, most probably barbecues and whatever else you get up to. So enjoy it. Have a good weekend.
Thanks,
I look forward to seeing you at 7:30 on Monday morning for 5 sessions. Some of you who are on this, I look forward to you joining us. If you're not on it, I've posted further details in the comment section. So please take a look at it. It's incredible value. Daniel, the 2 sessions we've already had, you've provided incredible value. Speaking to you offline and who you've worked with as well, and being involved in McGrath, and for me, McGrath and John McGrath is the best agent I've ever come across. So to have somebody who's sat down and worked with John and set up all the McGrath training, I'm super excited. So thanks very much, and looking
Thanks,
forward.
Steve. And all I will say is the first day is prospecting. I'd be surprised if you don't get your whatever you're investing in times back 10 times. But if there's anything on lead generation, listing properties, vendor management, buyer management, anything, even about team structures, if there's any information that you want covered, please email Steve and I'll make sure I get it on that agenda on that Monday session for you or further during the week. So please be part of it. I'm really looking forward to meeting everyone, Steve.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot. I'm going to be back at 12:30 today with Katie Darlow from Number One Real Estate Agent in Newport. So look forward to you joining me then, and have a good morning, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, bye.
Cheers. Bye.